Good afternoon to all our participating members and a very, very warm welcome to CA Ritesh Tiwari, CA Rajinder Kumar Sethi and our dear moderator CA Maitreyi Swaminathan. Before I hand over the virtual dais to CA Maitreyi Swaminathan, a word of introduction about her. CA Maitreyi Swaminathan is an accounting professional with 24 years of experience in financial planning and analysis, project and general accounting with a focus on energy and construction industries. She has successfully executed first transitions to India focused on improving finance operations, process efficiency and cost reduction. She has ability to drive process automation. She has strong leadership experience on domestic and international assignments ranging from process transitions to evaluating complex merger proposals, has demonstrated team leadership skills including remote teams. She has proven ability to learn, grow, manage and deliver teams in diverse areas, provide management insight to executive leaders and empowering teams to drive value for clients. CA Maitreyi Swaminathan started her career with Indian Oil Corporation where she was there for 10 years, then migrating to Kazakhstan for a couple of years and for the last 11 years has been with the Flo Daniel Gurgaon where she is currently a regional finance controller Asia Pacific. She has been an excellent student as her academics proves that she is a rank holder in both intermediate and in final level in both the CA Chartered Accountancy course as well as the Company Secretary's course. So welcome all the participants and a very warm welcome to our panelists and dear moderator. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ranganathan. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Leadership Stories, where we will once again share a sneak peek into the life of CFOs. Today, once again, we have two eminent CFOs with us. First, Mr. R.K. Sethi, who started his career with Sahara India and grew to be the CFO of the power business in SR Power. He's worked through various different industries such as cement, paper, synthetics, and ending his career with power. So welcome aboard, Mr. Sethi. And our other CFO today is Mr. Ritesh Tiwari. Ritesh is the CFO of Hindustan Unilever and the Vice President for South Asia for the company. He's had various roles in India and abroad and believes in reimagining possibilities and bringing value with values. So welcome aboard, Ritesh.
Thank you.
I will first like to invite our eminent panelists to share their stories, their story of their own career, to talk about things that they learned at each stage as they grew through their career with our participants. And then we'll start with the panel discussion. So I'll first like to invite Mr. R.K. Sethi to share his story.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my great pleasure to be participant as a panelist in this forum. I am happy to be as a panelist here. Thanks, Mr. Ranganathan, for giving me this opportunity and sharing my thoughts. I started my career in way back 30 years ago, and it was with Sahara India. I worked for 2 years there only. Then I moved to cement plant in MP, that is Birla Group company. It was great experience of working in the plant site, at the plant site, and having the experience of plant working operations. One good learning during the Birla function was the learning and adopting the Parta system. The Birlas are famous for the Parta system. Then I moved to, I worked for Indorama Synthetics at Nagpur Butibori plant. So 3 years I was there in plant working. After gaining experience of plant working, I got an opportunity at JK organization in Delhi. So I moved to Delhi. I worked for 5 years. During my working with the JK organization, I seen the working of demerger of JK organization corporation from cement and paper business. Then again merger of two paper companies. So that was a great learning of merger and demerger during my working with the JK organization. Then I moved to Mumbai and joined Bangur Group company, again a paper company. I worked for 3 years. The good learning again there was It was a Sikh company which was taken over by Bangurs, and the great experience was coming out of Sikh companies forum, and it was a turnaround company from losses to profits. Then I got an opportunity to work with SR Group in power business. So my last stick with power with the SR was for 10 years, and it was great working with the SR Group in power business. It was a great organization and great learning in SR Power. I am retired for last 3 years, enjoying my personal life, retired life. So that is the brief for now. I come from a small village in Rajasthan, so becoming chartered accountant was a great for me, and sharing this today with you. Thank you very much for now.
Thank you, Mr. Sethi. Very inspiring story of moving over various roles across the country and, heading a company as big as SR. And of course, very interesting to hear about the Patta system of Birla. We've all heard a lot about it. So maybe we'll touch a little bit more, during the course of this session.
Sure, definitely.
Over to you, Ritesh.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, super thanks, Mr. Ranganathan, to you and to the Institute to organize this and get some of us on the panel, and to all the audience who made time on a Sunday to come and listen to Mr. Sethi and myself. First of all, Mr. Sethi, very, very inspirational journey you had. So I also look forward to be part with you today in the panel and also learn from you as to what your experience has been, given various interesting jobs that you have done. Talking about myself, I always prefer to start about me as a Ritesh, as person, and then I'll get into my professional side. So I'm born and brought up in Mumbai, have a lovely wife and 2 children. I have 2 boys, 17-year-old Harsh and a 13-year-old Neil. Harsh has just started his undergrad and he's moved to Leeds in UK to do his graduation, and Neil goes to grade 8. Between Manisha, my wife, and my 2 kids, this is what I value in life. So whatever I do, I ensure that happiness, health, and overall well-being of life is something which is instituted in the family, and that remains to be my first and last priority. So that's what I value in my life, is the first part of my introduction. Second, very briefly, Maitri talked about my purpose. I firmly believe that whatever you do, if you do with purpose, you will get far more value out of what your efforts are going to be in any space. What drives me personally is to reimagine possibility. So whenever I get into any area which I look into, my whole objective is how can I do it differently? What is a possibility which I can bring to that space? And that's what really drives me in what I end up doing. The second part of my purpose is reimagine possibility and bring value with values. Again, I'm a firm believer that as finance professional, whatever I work upon, it has to bring value to the business. If it is not value creating, it's not effort worth taking. But the last element of the purpose which I have is to bring value with values. Again, I firmly believe, like our C Institute, like our qualification that all of us have got, if there are no values which are embedded in what we drive, it is meaningless what we end up achieving, and which is what my purpose in life is. The third element of my introduction, I thought, let me spend some time with you, is the attitude which I carry. I carry an attitude which is, in the end, everything will be fine, otherwise it will not be the end. So that's what is a third part of my introduction, that I'm a very optimistic person. And we require that, as all of you very well know, when you do your CA studies, if you're not optimistic, the journey ain't going to be easy. And equally our profession, when we are up against multiple challenges where we have to stand ground as a chartered accountant professional, we have to have the resilience in us. And that's the third part of my introduction. And typically whatever I deal and be with, I spend time in that. The fourth part of my introduction is my me time. I'm a firm believer in today's time, especially in today's time. If one has not managed time well, between your professional life, how much time you spend, between your family life, how much time you spend, and on your me time, how much time you spend. The fourth part of my introduction is I'm a keen golfer. I love to play golf. And when I'm on a golf course, those 4.5 hours amidst the greens of the grasslands, it just brings lots of fresh energy to me, creativity to me, learning to myself. And I spend a lot of time learning, improving, and then going back to the game. And that's what gives me energy in the weekend. Because I've seen that if the work phase is extremely intense, my family gives an... There's some...
We can hear you.
Yeah.
You're
my
still with
computer
us.
wants to restart, which is not a good thing to do. So if that happens, give me 30 seconds. I hope I'm back soon. Uh, so that's the fourth part, which is I want to get energy from doing something different than work, different than family, and my own me time. And golf gives me that. Now, it's golf for me. It could be running for you. It could be Sangeet for you. It could be social work for you. But it is very important, in my view, to have your own me time, which then completes you. So that's my introduction. And now let me spend a little bit time talking about my professional journey. Like all of you, I have also started my journey, first of all, getting ready to life. And a great part of that contribution has been what my parents gave me, the right amount of learnings, the right amount of ethics, which I have taken place in the corporate world, and an important foundation of a chartered accountant degree. And I've learned that very early in my career, the work ethics, which a CA degree teaches you, the hard work that we do, the kind of dedication that we have, is what really started my career journey. So I started with Hindustan Unilever as my first job, but before that, I worked for 3 years as an article trainee with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I did my CA articleship. And then I worked for last a little over 2 decades. I worked for Hindustan Unilever Limited. My career journey has been pretty broad in terms of I've spent half of my career in India, and balance half I have spent between Singapore and UK as part of my various jobs. And as we get into more conversation, I will bring alive the kind of experiences, and I'll drop on that as I keep dealing with various questions we'll end up having. But broadly, I have done roles in hardcore accounting. I still remember my first job was to make accounts for Hindustan Unilever and all its subsidiary company. And even back in those days, it was a company with 10,000 crore turnover. From writing my CA final exams and making those balance sheets in P&L to really writing for a 10,000 crore turnover company, balance sheet, P&L, schedules, getting them audited. It was a fascinating start to the career. And the learning which I had as a chartered accountant made that much easier in terms of what I had to do with. But then I realized when you go to the real world, the kind of challenges we are thrown upon are very varied. And again, I'll talk some more about it later upon in time. But I realized much earlier, 20 years back in my journey, that if digital is not in the front foot of finance profession, we'll end up spending unlimited hours in office to get our books closed, get our accounts prepared, and our reports prepared and then submitted. That was my first experience as a chartered accountant back in India. And I worked also in areas outside finance. I have been chemical buyer at one point in time for Hindustan Unilever. I managed chemical buying for the region as well for the company. I've spent time as a demand planner, where you work with people in sales, in marketing, in projecting what demands your products will have. Basis that, then you're able to decide what production capacity you need, where you need production capacity, and then at what frequency you want to produce which pack. Equally, the kind of money you want to spend in your various advertising and sales promotion activities, which is driven by demand generation. And to me, it was a very important stint which I did. There were two elements of that. One, an ability to understand how demand generation happens. Because I relied as a CA profession, if I don't have a good grip on the business, how demand is generated, I will never be able to bring financial value to the organization. Equally, at that point in time, we implemented SAP APO for automating how demand planning happens. How do you read trends? How do you forecast trends? And it was the single largest instance of SAP APO implemented anywhere in Asia. That's the kind of experience very early in my career I was exposed to. I got it. I've spent time twice in UK, 2009 to 2012. And then later on now, last 4 years, I was based there before I just came back from UK to India. And lots of learning how global business models run, how talent in different parts of the world get motivated and inspired to what they have to do. How a large corporate works with its own strategy at a global level, where it manages multiple country P&Ls in different parts of the world. Those are the kind of experiences I had as working in UK for Unilever globally. One of my special experience, and I'll shut after that so that we can get into the next part of conversation, is I was a group controller for HUL. And this is a time when we implemented in the country IFRS. I was working very closely with the CA Institute. I was part of the Accounting Standards Board of the country, working with CA Institute to implement Ind AS at that point in time. And it was a fascinating experience to see how we as CA Institute could land and get this entire change in the country of getting our country's accounting standards to international levels. And fabulous work many colleagues in CA have done across various industries and businesses to get business and India ready to Ind AS. GST got launched at point in time. Again, a very, very dramatic change in the tax landscape of the country. was a very special experience as a finance professional to lead that and execute for the business. Equally, at that point in time, we had company law change, which brought its own set of challenges, but also own set of stepped up governance. Was again fascinating to involve and drive elements like that. So that was a very special role which I did, in which I could contribute to the profession, but equally contribute very differently in the stewardship agenda, risk and control management agenda for the business. And so look forward today to talking all of you. Apologies for a very long introduction, so Maitri, apologies for that. But I thought, let me just give some flavors of who I am and what I have done, and then we'll get into many different areas of conversation.
No, thanks, Ritesh. That was fascinating, and no need to apologize. It was completely, I was absorbed in listening to what you were sharing. And it's fantastic you've been able to balance your work with, your own priorities, your me time. And we'll talk a little bit more about optimism, resilience, things like that. And your diverse roles, not just in accounting, but with chemical buying and, of course, as demand planner. And then coming back to the core area of accounts and finance to the extent that you've been able to, contribute to the accounting standard board of India and help with the implementation of the Ind AS. So fascinating journey you've had, and it's going to be a pleasure talking to you this afternoon. We'll begin the panel discussion now. And before we do that, request to the participants to type your questions, any questions that you would like to address to the panelists, because we'll be looking out for your questions and we'll bring them up during the session. So please share whatever questions you have for Mr. Sethi and for Mr. Tiwari here today. And with that, we'll kick off the panel discussion. My first question for you both, gentlemen, is that, you've had very long and diverse careers. And if you could summarize what your top leadership tenets are that you've learned over the course of your very successful careers. What are the top 3, 4, 5 things that you would like to share with our participants today that stand out in your mind as things that have helped you get where you've gone to?
Mr. Shetty, shall I go first?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So there are a few things, and I think a very interesting question, and there's an area which, Maitri, I regularly reflect upon as to what has worked as part of the career, which is driven so well for the last 2 decades now, and what has not worked, which is equally important, what has not worked. So let me start with what has worked. One of my learning has been, how does one make a distinction between job description and job experience? Every time in my career, I was given a job description, basis which I was given a role to do. But I made a choice, what job experience I want from that job description, which then allowed me to redefine what I have to do in my role. And that one perspective change really gave me a lot of energy because I just felt it's mine. The job is mine. The role is mine. That's the experience I want to get from the role. And that gave me a perspective of a very different learning journey, which otherwise I would not have achieved as part of doing that job at that role. So that's my first learning as part of my career. Second learning has been a very, very important work ethics. At the end of the day, as we grow into different organizations and different roles we end up doing, if you don't have strong work ethics, again, it's something which does not stand you in good stead in long term. And there are elements of work ethics. I alluded earlier on values. If I'm doing something, it has to be right. I need to be comfortable. I come from a middle class background and I have own my set of ethics. If that doesn't match with the ethics which the organization has, if that doesn't match with the ethics of the work which I do, I will be very uncomfortable. Now, I've been blessed to work for Hindustan Unilever, where my personal ethic matches absolutely fabulously with the organization's ethics, and hence makes me very comfortable. But equally hard work, equally amount of attention to details. This is some elements which I also look forward in tomorrow's and today's generation of leaders, that do people have that hard working ethic, that attention to detail, and many times that makes a very important difference between good and great. So that's a second learning which I have in terms of work ethics. The third experience and conversation which I always keep doing is, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, you're in the wrong profession, the wrong job. So if you're not having fun enough as part of your job, as part of your role activity, you are somewhere in the wrong place and you've got to move on. Is my third reflection, because if I don't get energy to what I'm doing and what impact I'm making, then I will never end up doing a good job. So that's my third reflection, that important that you keep having fun in what you're doing. And the day the fun element, the fun quotient is becoming lesser, there is some problem. The last thought, let me also add to what I just spoke, was I've realized as one keeps growing in an organization, in your jobs, there's a very important transition a leader has to make. And the transition is from giving the right answer to asking the right question. We are taught as we learn, as we grow up, that there's a problem we got to solve, give an answer to that. There's a question we got to answer, and we got to answer right. So we have always been in that mode of giving the right answer. But leadership is all about also asking the right question. And the day you make that journey from giving the right answer to asking the right question, in my mind, you have made a first shift of your leadership impact to the business. And we are so well equipped as a profession to do that for the business, to do that for the community. So those are my few reflections to your question, Murthy.
To take
Mr.
it forward,
Sethi?
I agree with you. Yeah, he has made, Mr. Sethi has made rightly one point which I also wanted to say: enjoy the work. So if we enjoy the work, we can really contribute more and more in our organization, to our department, and to our personal life also. It will help. It will reduce stress also. To edit more things, I also agree with that. We should have detailing concept, or I should say, going into in-depth study of the anything which we do. So if we go logical for any work which we are doing, so we'll understand it more. We can share our thought very logically, and we can definitely convince our management or other members also with confidence. Second part is delegation during in the organization will help. It will help two way. It will help to develop the team, as well as to have free time for ourselves to do more analytical work and more strategic work for the organization. And the last thing which I want to add, what I already covered, is dedication. So if we have to ensure that we do our work with full dedication and loyalty to the organization. So that is what learning we wanted to say.
Fantastic takeaways from there, Mr. Sethi, Mr. Tiwari. I think working with dedication, hard work, attention to detail, job description versus job experience. That was a very interesting, insight that you shared with us, Ritesh. And of course, ethics, which is most important, which is key and critical in my mind, to achieve success in any profession. And of course, transitioning from giving the right answers to asking the right questions. Very pertinent. Thank you so much for sharing all that. So with all that, what is a typical day in the life of a CFO? How does your day begin, and when does it end, and what is a typical day look like? Could you share that with our participants, please?
Yeah, can I take it first? So when I used to work, the day I should start with. I used to start with my newspaper during going to on the way to my office. So I used to ensure that I read at least one business paper and one general paper during my on with the way to the office. And I used to make sure that I should reach office at least 45 minutes to 1 hour before the office starts or other people comes to the office, so that I can prepare for myself for the things which we have to do. What is left out yesterday, we can attend that, and we can prepare for the day, for the meetings and other work which we have to attend in the day. So day used to be typically, there used to be three parts during the day. One is meetings or discussions or work within the team. So for that is preparation for that and discussions with the team members. Second is the internal meetings with the departments or the management. So that for that, if we have to prepare papers, study, going into details. Third part is meetings or discussions with the stakeholders like bankers, lenders, institutions, or the investors, if any. So, and I have made a point that working as a CFO or finance person, I used to make sure that I should visit bankers, even if there is no scheduled meeting, there is no scheduled work, there is no agenda, just to brief them about the organization, understand what is going on. And I have seen that it works well when we have actual work with them, and it supports the organization and personally to us also. and end of the day while coming back to the home, relaxing with the old songs on the FM.
Interesting, very, very interesting. But starting your day 45 minutes early and then ending your day with music. That sounds fantastic. I think we lost Ritesh here momentarily, so we'll just wait for him to come back. And while he comes back, just a question for you, Mr. Sethi.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I also aid my personal life for 1 minute. I will take it. See, I have one son and one daughter. My son has done engineering from IIT Mumbai, and then he has done MBA from IIM Bangalore. For last 4 years, he is working for Bain Consulting in Mumbai. My daughter, she has done BBA from NMIMS. Then she has done MBA from IIM Lucknow, and presently she is working with Citi in the treasury function in corporate office. My wife, Varsha, she's a tutor. She's well qualified and taking tuitions at home for last 30 years. Thank you. Sorry for this.
Fantastic. And we've got Ritesh back. So Ritesh, would you like me to repeat the question for you?
Yes, so I just lost for a minute or two. Are you able to hear me, see me well?
Yes, you're back now.
Okay, yeah.
So just to continue with the question on what does your typical day look like? How does it begin and how do you like to take it from there?
Yeah. So let me start by talking about first, what's a typical job a CFO or a senior finance professional has? And then that will also then give an understanding as to what a typical day could bring to us. In my mind, there are 4 different phases to a CFO. We are a steward for the business. So the entire risk management, controls, accounting, reporting, there is one phase of a CFO. The second phase of a CFO is operator for the business, driving margins in the business, driving the talent agenda in the business, the savings that we need to do to run an organization, the go-to-market structures of the company. So there is a lot of operational details that one needs to lead and drive in the organization to drive business results. That's the second phase of an CFO, which is an operator. The third phase of a CFO is a catalyst, because ultimately a CFO is also a change agent for the organization to develop new capabilities, to manage and navigate extremely turbulent external atmosphere, which all of us know the times that we are in, but especially for the last couple of years, be it commodities, be it the kind of pandemic we are in, we require massive amount of change to our business model, to our talent strategy, and then how do you organize and then deliver those change for the organization to ensure that your business model is still protected and is successful. That's a third phase of a CFO as a catalyst. The fourth phase of a CFO is a strategist, where you have to think about as to what's the next business strategy, what's the current business strategy, how do we create value, how do we future-proof the business, and those strategic direction which the business takes really will tell in times to come the kind of value we can create as an organization. So for me, a typical day, I have these 4 phases: of a steward, of an operator, of a catalyst, and of a strategist. And my day sometime is a complete day full of being a strategist hat, because we are sitting and talking about the next go-to-market structure for the organization, or we're sitting and talking the next accounting landscape that we want to drive, or what should be the digital transformation journey as an organization and as a function we should embark upon. So day gets spent in that. Or someday you are into deep dive of your accounts, your balances, your balance sheet, your schedules, controls, your automated controls, your manual controls, your review controls, and a day gets spent in doing that. Someday I just talk talent. We're spending a lot of time there. How do we recruit, train, and develop the best talent that HUL in my business can end up having? So there, which is where amount of energy and time goes into. Someday just talking change and then saying how do we land the change. But those are very few luxurious days when you do only strategy, when you do only stewardship. Most of the days you are meeting to meeting, basically going from agenda A to agenda B. And at some point in time, you're a strategist, some point in time, you're an operator, some point in time, you're an operator and a catalyst together. So multiple hats you end up wearing as part of that conversation. And hence the day becomes extremely intense. So this is what the professional side of my day is. And then I realized at some point in time that if this day is going to be so intense, if I need to bring my full self, there has to be something else also in my day, which will then give me energy. So personally, I practice yoga, and I had back issues some time back, which the only way I could come out was regular yoga to keep my body flexibility, to keep my core strength. So I do deploy, I ensure that every day I spend time and do a good job in terms of practicing yoga. And that gives me a lot of energy in terms of my day job and my day journey, which ends up having. Equally good amount of healthy eating is what I really focus upon as part of my day, because healthy nutritionist meal in right proportion also gives me right amount of energy. So apart from my busy day, my day also gets spent time in choosing my yoga postures I need to do, healthy food I need to do, my right ergonomic practice, the way I should sit, the way I should look every 20 minutes, 20 seconds, 20 minutes. I want to take a break in terms of looking 20 feet away. So a lot of those small things I include as part of my daily routine, so that I'm able to have a very high pressure day, but then you deliver a high pressure day and you have energy to go back next day as well with a high pressure day. So I hope it gives some flavor, Matthew, of what a day looks like.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Ritesh, and thanks, Mr. Sethi. Very interesting days. Obviously, you have, but the most interesting part is how you have to shift gears. Shift gears between, like Mr. Sethi said, preparing for meetings to going through the day's agenda, through meeting external stakeholders, like you said, wearing various hats of steward and operator, catalyst, strategist, whatever it is that you're called upon, and at snap of a finger, you have to change gears and you have to put on the different hat. So that, I think, is the most challenging part of your day jobs. Kudos to you for managing that. So I'm going to switch track here a little and talk about, you both bring various different perspectives, very different perspectives, in fact. Mr. Sethi having traveled through the country, various parts of the country, and through various, companies. And Ritesh, you, from being a management training in the company, have grown to be the CFO, and you're the VP for South Asia. So there's a lot of diversity Mr. Sethi has seen in terms of the various companies he's worked with, the various geographies within India he's seen. Ritesh, you various geographies overseas and being with the same company. So the lessons that you've learned from that and how that has helped you grow, because they're very different perspectives, but then they have led to the same kind of end goal where you've ended at the pinnacle of your career, doing the most satisfying jobs that a chartered accountant could hope for. Just your thoughts on how each of these journeys, though being different, have led to the same kind of end goal.
Mr. Shetty, you want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the learning from different industries will be different. But the concept in all the industries is one common. That is, we should be going into depth, detailing, as Mr. Tiwari also mentioned. That is must, and the learning with me is very good in that. As I mentioned earlier, the learning in my career was experience of merger, demerger, acquisitions, and one good learning while working with SR was sitting in Mumbai. We have gone to IPO at London and listed one company at London Stock Exchange. That was great, and it was a holding company of two businesses of SR Group, that is energy business, like oil and power business. So I was the key person from power business, and the learning was sitting in Mumbai. Of course, we visited London also quite a few times. So that was a great learning experience during SR organization. And working with the one more company, which was SIP company. So coming out of the tag of SIP company, it was a great achievement for me. See, how we are done is, again, as I mentioned you, if we meet the stakeholders, lenders regularly and explain them what we are going, whether we are going in the right direction or not, even if you do not pay them in time, it helps a lot. Of course, ultimately, coming out of the tag of the SIP company, we have to ensure that we do our own financing plan, put in place the financing plan, and make sure that we meet our commitments. One good thing in Indian banking sector is they are always there to support to the business within their criterias, and sometimes going beyond the criterias, well within the norms. So that is good. I have experienced that also. So that's the thing I wanted to mention for it.
If I go next, Maitri, after that. So yeah, absolutely. I think the career has brought a very different amount of learning journey. And you're right, there are always more than one possible path which one can take to achieve the career objective which one has.
I think we lost Ritesh momentarily, so while we wait for him to join back, Mr. Sethi, I have a question for you from our
Yes,
audience, which I thought we could take up at this point.
Yes, please.
And there's a gentleman named Nirav Gandhi who's asking that what's the most challenging situation that you faced in your career?
I should say, what's most challenging is one is in personal life taking decision of change from one organization to other organization. And why it is challenging is because whenever I have done changes, it was during my good time in that organization. With good response, good support from the management, and whenever I took change, the management, local management of that company did not wanted to leave me at any cost. So that was a big challenge in personal life. The other challenge is adopting the new management. So whenever
Yeah,
I'll
sorry,
take the
Satish, we
question.
lost you momentarily, but we just took up a question from one of the participants with Mr.
Sure,
Sethi
sure.
was helping us with.
So I'll just so challenging one challenge, another challenge is this adopting the new management, but with working after the many managements. So I learned that practice how to adopt the new practices, new management. So that was challenge 1C, and we should not be fear of that. We should have confidence of our work and the capabilities. So we'll definitely adopt those also. So that two challenges I wanted to say.
Fantastic, thanks. Over back to you, Ritesh, on the
Yeah.
discussion that we were having about different paths leading to the same outcome.
Yeah. Sorry, Maitri, I think there's a system upgrade which was planned as part of the software, and hence that has been the issue. What I'll do is in the next this thing, I'll swap my laptop so that I'm not into this laptop after I finish this engagement. So the question I was referring to earlier, which you mentioned about as to what are the learning journeys, and absolutely to your point, there are different route one ends up taking of experience which to achieve the career objective. In my case, a few things have worked pretty well. First, the choice of the breadth of the roles which I have done. Because I always believe if your experience is diversified and so you're experiencing a country business model, a global business model, or you're working as part of the core accounting function in an organization, or you're business partnering a function or a business in the organization, or you're doing some hardcore expertise role of M&A, or you're doing treasury, or you're doing taxation. It's so important that one has a very diverse set of experience. And ultimately, one chooses what diversification of experience one basically is interested in. In my case, I chose a set of experience which was core finance function, jobs like being a controller, like being a corporate accountant. I chose experience of doing business partnering at local level for in India, at global level. I chose roles which were giving me a very good bird's eye strategist view of an organization, which the role which I did back in London was I was heading a part of corporate finance as performance management for the group of Unilever. Equally, the roles which I've done in terms of outside finance function. I spent 5 years working outside finance function, doing demand planning role and procurement role. It also gave me very different kind of learning. So one of the things which has worked as part of the root of the career was the kind of jobs I did and diversification of the experiences. Second, every role which I got into, again, to ensure that I built a successful career, idea was what different I am doing. Am I A, doing my job well? B, am I creating future capabilities so that my successor is equally successful? I'm a firm believer that any role we end up doing, if my successor is not successful, I have not done a good job. Because if it means you let a business which is crumbling, which is held by you through very loose strings, and it falls apart as you move on. So that's something which is not right, and hence has been always a focus for me that I do a role well, but equally ensure that I do it so well that I leave it in a shape and a space from a capability perspective, talent perspective, so that my successor also becomes equally successful. was the second lens which I had as part of my career experience to make it richer and purposeful. Third, there are two big waves, and we'll talk a little more about it later upon in time: digital and sustainability. And any role we are end up getting into as a finance professional, if at all we are not riding the two wave of learning and of giving to these two areas pretty high amount of importance, we won't end up doing it well. So that's a third area, I would say, of learning, which I have deployed pretty well in what I have done in terms of doing lots of work in digital transformation all across my career this far, and has really helped me in shaping my learning and shaping my career as well. The other dimension of being successful and learning from various jobs is the entire learning journey per se. I think the moment we realize that learning never stops, just because you are a student, you are doing a CA, it doesn't mean that's what learning is all about. Learning is continuous. I'm saying in our jobs, if you don't end up learn, we'll be very soon outdated and irrelevant in times to come. Be it what's happening in the macro environment outside, what's happening in micro trends in the country, what's happening in the profession, what's happening in the business, what's happening in the global supply chain, what skill sets, how do we lead teams in such pandemic. It's not an easy give. One has to really think through and then learn in that journey. So I'm a lifelong learner. So that is also one of the elements of my thinking as to what has made a career successful. And the path which I've chosen is that every role I've got into, I want to ensure I just keep learning and then keep improving. And learning comes from everybody. It comes from your seniors, comes from your peers, it comes from young team members. I have two people who reverse mentor me. They are very young in the organization. They have a few years of experience, but that's the generation which I need to lead. So I need to learn from them as to what are they working and doing upon. So I do reverse mentoring, where I mentor lots of people, but there are also very youngsters who also mentor me as well, so that I don't become dinosaur. So to me, the learning pathway is extremely critical as part of the journey. So yeah, so those I would say are certain elements which are extremely important to me, what has helped me in driving my career thus far.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ritesh. If I were to kind of summarize that, it would be very mindful choices on what you've done, whether it's in terms of the path your career takes, or whether it's in terms of what you choose to learn and spend your time enriching your, learning path. So all of that, and we have several questions from our participants on what is the right path to choose. But would it be right for us to say that each person has to make their choice and be very mindful in their choice? Because it's these choices that will lead them to where they will head tomorrow. And there's no right or wrong answer. Would that be appropriate?
No, absolutely. In my mind, there is no right path. There are multiple paths one can take to achieve career objectives. But the path has to be something which you enjoy. The point that we just spoke some time back. It has to be diverse, you to keep learning in the path, and something which you enjoy. Otherwise, you will never keep progressing on that path. So whatever path one ends up choosing, please ensure that you are enjoying the ride. Because the destination is not important, it's irrelevant. It's a journey which is very important and most relevant. So though there are multiple paths, but my always recommendation is choose the one which you think you'll enjoy the most.
I'm going to bring in one question from our participant, Mr. Deepak Ajmera. He says, how do you advance yourself from a controller role to a CFO in a culturally diverse environment of an organization? And do you need to increase your soft skills or continue to take on more and more tasks? What is it? What's that key?
Mr. Shetty, shall I go first? Or Mr. Shetty saying something? Go ahead, Mr. Shetty.
You want me to take a first?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Shetty.
See, taking different diversified is not a difficult task for the chartered accountant. See, what happens, the basic concept remains basic. When we are working in an organization, the concept of accounting, controls remain same. What we have to decide is how to take it forward, how to analyze it, how we can contribute for value additions in the organization. So even if we are working in different industry, only thing is the costings will be different, but the systems, procedures will be the same. And maybe the service industry may be a little different, so I can't comment on the service industry, but the manufacturing and the commodity, that industry the working culture will be the same, working environment will be the same.
If I may just build upon what Mr. Sethi just mentioned, absolutely. It's not a given that if you're a very good controller, you can also become a very good CFO. The point I was making earlier, there are 4 different facets of our CFO. You are a steward, which is where controllership squarely fits in. But you are a strategist, you are a catalyst, you are an operator. If your skill sets and your career experiences are not broad enough across all the 4 phases, you will not.
I think we lost Ritesh again. So while we wait for him to come back, let me pick up another question from our viewer. So how do you, this is from Ashish Malu. How do you ensure that work ethics with business needs or requirements, if there's a contradictory requirement between work ethics, the requirements of business, and our own personal ethics, then how do you resolve this contradiction? Sorry, Ritesh, we lost you.
I've now managed to switch my computer to a Mac, which is that one is now got rebooted. So now this should not have an issue. This is the point I was making, that the 4 different phases that we have, and and unless you have got experience footprint which is broad enough across all the 4 landscapes of what a professional has to do, you will never be able to make a transition from a good controller role, a big controller role, into a CFO. But equally, the point which was part of the question about ethics and the soft skills, absolutely important. In times that we're in today, in fact, that was one of the elements which I thought I'll bring up into conversation at some point in time, but glad the question which has come kicks that conversation in. The humanness that we need to show is what leadership of tomorrow, in my mind, will be defined upon. We know the kind of challenges people go through. No, people are working from home. Many people don't switch on their videos when they work from home because they might be in one room, the child might be sitting and studying, the wife might be sitting and working, and so does the husband might be sitting and working. Not everybody is privileged enough to have that space of working and that internet connection at home to be able to bring a fuller self to work. In times like this, even small things like this, if one is not conscious of, and then how do we then give equal opportunity, as we will not be able to be successful? We keep talking about diversity and inclusion. A small example of driving gender balance in an organization. If that's not done very well, again, that soft element of the workforce, which is very important. Do you have a diversified organization to take the agenda forward? Becomes very crucial. As a leader, hence, my job then becomes, am I driving that right culture? Am I driving that humanness in the organization? Am I driving that diversity and inclusion in the organization? Becomes very critical. So exactly the way the question was asked, that there's far more one has to do beyond being a good controller to be able to become a CFO, or for that matter, to become a big leader in any organization.
So I think you very effectively answered it. Like, the gentleman has asked whether there's a need to increase the soft skills or continue to take on more and more tasks. And I think you've effectively covered how all these aspects, paying attention to the needs of people, and of course, improving your learning and all of that plays a role in making the transition.
What will never get you there is to put more number of hours. Success is not equal to more number of hours of work deployed at work. Yes, there are days, there are weeks, there are parts of the month we end up working very hard. The business and circumstances, situation demands us to lean in. But success is not equal to number of work hours. So I think that's an element which is very important to reinforce.
Thanks for putting that so eloquently. A related question here is from Sajid Balakrishnan, who says, it would be helpful if you could cover emotional intelligence and man management.
Yeah, so emotional intelligence, absolutely. See, there are various situations. There's an IQ that needs to get deployed, and there's an EQ which needs to get deployed. Some conversations, some business challenges are driven, and you can crack it. You can make advances. You can make it right by developing and driving right amount of intelligence in that area. But equally, at the end of the day, we are human organizations. Doesn't matter what business one is in. You're into fast-moving consumer goods. You're into banking. You're into metal. You're into aerospace. Whatever you are in, it's ultimately a group of people which ultimately come together to drive any decision or any agenda in the organization. And hence, that emotional quotient of what I mentioned a little while earlier. That sensitivity to the needs of your team members, that sensitivity of the needs of the stakeholders, if you're not smart enough to pick that up, we will end up always working cross-purpose with people. ultimately in an organization, it requires, let me say, 5, 6 people to say yes, but it requires one person to say no. And you will not have 100% basically cooperation to get your job done. And of course, I don't mean that one has to have always have 100%. At the end of the day, there's 80% agreement, but 100% commitment is what one wants in any organization. And that will only come if at all you have a very heightened amount of awareness of what is other person's perspective, what is other stakeholders' perspective. And if that is not embedded into your thinking process, into your activities which are driving a decision, it will never be a full, impactful, collaborative outcome one will end up achieving. So I absolutely agree that a good combination of IQ and EQ is what is needed, especially when decisions are getting complex and there are human beings who are involved in the decision-making process.
Mr. Sethi, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add one thing. He has covered most of the things, but I used to practice it is in my team or in organization. If there is a birthday of anybody, so I used to wish them birthday, or if I know their family members' birthdays or marriage anniversary, I used to wish them personally. So that has helped them with that. It will give very good motivation to them. Similarly, if there is some problem in anybody's personal life, if they can share with us and we ask them about that, and suppose anybody is not in family, somebody is not well, if they go early from the office and next day when they come, if we ask them what was the problem, how it has been resolved, you want any help, it helps them very in motivation them. So that is what I used to practice in my life.
Thanks, Mr. Sethi. I think it's very important to recognize that the employee is not just the person you see, but an extended family back in their houses, which also they bring in their thoughts and everything to work every day. So it's important to recognize the full package, and thanks for sharing that perspective. Ritesh, you had shared the role of River, and you had mentioned about mentors and their role in your career. So I'd just like to ask you both, what has been the role of your own mentors in your career growth? And I'm sure you've been a mentor to many. So what are your expectations on how mentees should reciprocate to the mentoring that you give to them? And then, of course, Ritesh, from you, reverse mentoring, of course, we've heard about that.
Let me pick it up, then Mr. Sethi can build on that. So in my mind, mentorship is very different than being a coach. A coach will tell you what to do, what not to do. A mentor never tells you what to do, what not to do. And hence that relationship and that contract of a mentor and a mentee is extremely crucial the way you define it. So wherever I have got into both, when I've been mentored by very, very able people, and equally when I have tried to make impact to somebody else's career in life by mentoring them, I first start by arranging and agreeing a mentorship contract. When I say it's not a written contract, but I'm saying there are things which are very important. A, there should be trust in that relationship. That what has been shared is shared in that relationship. It's important. It's a very transparent and open relationship where you are able to discuss your development needs, your aspirations you have in your career. And in that entire relationship, one should never end up saying what one should do, one should not do. The whole idea and objective out here is to get best out of the person. That's the objective. So idea is to basically support, and then sometimes it means showing a little different direction, giving some ideas, some inputs, ideas to understand, appreciate the kind of challenge that the person is going through, and then debate together what could be an outcome. Because otherwise, the moment you change yourself from a mentor to a coach, it's a very different thing, where the coach will tell you what to do, what not to do. In that way, you will never get the full potential of the person tapped. See, one wants to tap the full potential, don't get into a dictatorship conversation where do this and do that, or don't do this, don't do that. Let the person discover what works best. Let the person discovers what's the path one has to take to come out and be successful. To me, that's one element. But having mentorship to start with is very important. So I have been very, very fortunate by having some very talented and some very fabulous people who have mentored me as part of my career journey. I take that effort in terms of booking time in that person's diary. I take an effort to prepare myself for that mentorship conversation, in which I go with a very clear agenda. I got to speak 2 things to you today, or I got to show you one area of work which I have done. Then give me feedback, what I have done good, what I could have done differently. So I'm just not going, okay, tell me what I should do to become great. That's never the objective. So the person who's mentoring me should have a good amount of understanding what I'm going through, what my development journey is, what my learning journey is. So that works in my mind very well. A frequent and continuous engagement is very important. If you do one session today, one session 6 months later, then you forget about it. Tomorrow morning you jump to some other mentor, then you find somebody else. It will never work. It has to be also continuity of the relationship with sense of working. So to me, those are the few elements of what a successful mentorship looks like. Reverse mentoring, the point which I was talking about, we are in digital age. Today's generation is learning and growing digitally. We all know there are 50 to 60 million individuals in the country today, or 1.5 billion population. These are digital natives. They live the life of internet. And these are the workforce of tomorrow which comes and joins us. If I need to lead this workforce of tomorrow, I need to understand their perspectives, where they come from, what drives them, how do they make their choices. The best way to understand that is to get mentored by somebody who's of that ecosystem. And which is why in my mind, reverse mentoring works very well, where one has to be humble enough to say, I got to learn as well. And I got to learn a lot from people who are coming from this generation. What are their motivations? What drives them? How do they make their choices? And I've seen that as part of that conversation, it has really helped me of opening my perspective and thinking differently. Because I have led the teams of the past. To lead the teams of the future, I need to understand that. If a leader doesn't understand whom you're leading, you will never be able to do the job. And all of us know leadership is not about motivating people. You can motivate people by giving the right job. You can motivate people by giving the right pay. But unless people are inspired, they will never be able to do the next right thing that you would want to drive. So my mind always is that how do I make the journey from motivating people to inspiring people? And the only way I do that is to understand them far, far better. And which is where in my mind, reverse mentoring has a very important space.
So Sethi, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add one thing only. See, I used to take it as a opportunity to develop the people by explaining them in-depth knowledge, detailing why it has to be done this way only. If we do this way, it will be correct, and if we do not do in this way, then it will not be correct. See, whenever I used to review the papers or any work, if there is something which I need to tell them, I used to tell them upfront without hesitation, first of all. And I used to tell them in the positive way and explaining so that next time when it comes, similar type or same type, it used to be correctly. So I am happy to say that the people which I have mentored, they are today working as a controller in one big organization and the deputy CFO or CFOs of the small organizations maybe, but they are working together in good positions. They are learned. I am good. I am happy to say that whenever there is a Teachers' Day, I get number of messages from my people who have worked with me or those to whom I have mentored. Thank you.
Thanks. And there is a related question from one of our participants. Mr. Saurabh Goel is asking, how can I find a mentor for myself? So any thoughts on how, you managed to kick off that relationship with somebody?
So, see, when we end up doing our jobs, and the relationship is very important. And if any activity, any job you do, and you end up having transactional relationship with people, you will never see through a person whom you should and would want to make a mentor. And hence then, of course, approach that person to make a mentor. So first of all, when we work, please ensure that don't end up having transactional relationship with people and make it far more broader engagement with people. And then you have to then make your own effort of choosing your mentor. Ultimately, just because somebody is senior in the organization doesn't mean the person should mentor you. There has to be a nature of being complementary to each other. So if there's a set of skill set I need to learn, then I will have to choose who's the right person for that skill set that I need to get mentorship from. And then have I also invested in relationship with that person good enough that the person then volunteers and agrees to spend time. Remember, nobody gets rewarded or gets paid money in terms of becoming a mentor for somebody. It's always a relationship which is people do to find time from their own busy schedules to make space for somebody and mentor somebody. So yeah, so the best way to find a mentor, first of all, make good, warm relations with your colleagues, with your seniors as you work, and for that matter, your peers and your juniors. And then identify what is your learning need, and then select who should the right mentor be. And once you invested in that relationship, then of course you'll be end up achieving and then approaching a mentor to get it. Some organizations also have that a process in which they try to match a need of somebody's mentorship need and with somebody who's ready to get mentored and who wants to mentor people. So yes, I've seen certain organizations, including us at Hindustan Unilever, we have a pretty solid and very, very thriving mentorship culture where we encourage both people who are ready to give time and people who think they will benefit from receiving mentorship. So we do in a much more organized manner. But at the end of the day, I've had many mentors who were not appointed by my company to me. It's just that I thought I will learn from them. I approached them. And anyways, I had good relationship with them in the past that they could not say, no, Ritesh, I don't want to spend time on your learning journey. So they were more than happy to contribute efforts. And it always works two ways. There are people who will approach you. It's always give and take. And when you get benefit from somebody else, remember, there's some other talent who wants to learn from you. So always ensure that it's not only that you're receiving from somebody, but also be able to give, you can give.
Thanks, Ritesh. Well, move on to another aspect. We have a lot of participants here who are in their early or mid-career. And if you were to pick 3 top skills that one should focus on to build in themselves as future finance leaders, what would these 3 top skills be?
So I'd like to start this. One is communication. How we communicate with the team, people, organization, and how we present ourselves and our thoughts, our business, our plans, etc. So the communication is very important in our career. Second thing is strong business acumen. The person should have the knowledge of the business. He should understand the merits and demerits of the decisions, actions. So that is the second thing. Third is leadership qualities. One should be able to lead the team, organization in the setup where the he has to deal with the multiple functions, multiple departments, and the different people. So that 3 qualities I wanted to share this.
If I may just build upon what Mr. Sethi mentioned. First of all, absolutely agree with Mr. Sethi that communication, and probably I'll give one more element to that communication is storytelling. Very important in today's time that you are able to communicate well and able to give a very, very strong articulation of whatever area you're presenting. So efforts spent upon learning your storytelling or your communication skills will go a long way to create a far better impact of what you can bring to your area of work. So absolutely, Mr. Sethi, fully agree that area. Second area in my mind today is digital, what I was alluding earlier. Tomorrow's workforce will be digital natives. Today's workforce is already digital native. So if you're not advanced in that space, if you're not a digital native, if you're not a digital transformation leader, you will be left behind and you will become irrelevant sooner than later. So in my view, skill sets of being digital savviness that we can show in every element, every area of our work is extremely critical. And in third, I would say skill set, what was alluded earlier, and I'll come back to the same point of humanness. You will have to be very, very sensitive to the needs of the organization, needs of the business, and needs of the people working in and around you. If your antennas are not that high to perceive and understand that, you'll be ineffective in getting the job done. Sometimes you come out of a meeting, realize that why is that person not in agreement with me? I had such a fabulous proposal. I did so much amount of work in the thinking, but I did not get people aligned. It's just because we are not sensitive enough to understand the needs of that person. The perspective of that person, if it's not appreciated, one will never be able to win a conversation. And in the end, it's not about winning a conversation. It's about winning a conversation and winning the person. Every time I end up winning a conversation and losing the person, I believe it's a job badly done. In my mind, winning the conversation and winning the person is very important. That can only come if you have a heightened EQ, heightened humanness in your thinking, so that you will appreciate. I would say between digital communication, storytelling, and the humanness and EQ are the 3 important skill sets, especially in the times that we are in today, to move forward.
Well, thanks, Ritesh. And you will bring up a very important aspect of that humanness. And we've got a question from Anju Jacob here, and she says, as you move to the CFO, you have to manage multiple teams, and of course, you need to ensure that your team is motivated. But does leadership come naturally, or what will be your suggestion that how can we develop our leadership skills? Do we need to take a managerial course? Like, what is the key to developing these skills to lead people?
Yeah. So actually, my own, Anju, first of all, very good question. I think glad we will spend some time talking about it. And let me give my own reflection, Mr. Sethi, then you can build upon that. So there was a time when you would say, who is a great leader? When somebody would come to a dais, speak very flowery, speak with confidence, very well dressed, one gets impressed. Wow, someday I want to become a leader like that. And there was a time that was the epitome, that's how leadership was defined to all of us. And we would get gravitated to such leaders. But things changed after that. And the whole conversation came that leadership was, yes, it was that. Then leadership was about ambition. Leadership was about strong oratorship, ability to communicate, ability to speak well in forums. But then it started to change and it started to become that are people authentic? Are leaders authentic? Do they say and do they do what they mean? And people started judging that if somebody is not authentic, doesn't matter how ambitious a person is, how good, strong an orator that person is, the person never had followership. So times changed where people started to look for authentic leadership. So that's a dimension which of leadership got influenced and got changed in my mind. Then as time passed by, people became purposeful, people became authentic. Then a different dimension has got added to leadership, which is digital leadership. If you are not digitally forward, today every decision is data-led and machine-augmented. Every decision is data-led and machine-augmented. And if tomorrow's leader not able to articulate and live that and drive that, then we know that this leader is not going to survive. So that's a new dimension which got added to leadership to become successful. Then last 1.5 years taught us, you can be a fabulous orator, you can be somebody who's very ambitious, you can be somebody who's very authentic, you can be somebody who's very digitally forward, but if you're not human, you're not sensitive, I don't relate to you. If you don't understand what I'm going through today, in my home, there are 6 of us working from a same room. I can't put my video on. I can't participate effectively in a conversation. I don't follow you. Because today I'm saying everybody's on, we don't have people in front of us. We don't know what people are thinking when they're sitting in their desk in their home and working behind us. So that acute understanding of and being sensitive to the needs of the people, if that is not embedded in us, we will be failing in a leadership job. So in my mind, that's a dimension of humanness which has got added. And tomorrow's leader, if they're not human, they won't survive. So in my mind, that has been the journey. I think in my view, what leadership has changed the way it has been expectations around us.
Just to add, most of them covered so, but just to add is the leader has to not only expect from the others, he has to prove himself what is expected, and if he can prove himself, then he can lead the team. So he has to do the things which he is expecting from others. He has to be an example to others. Then the people will think that he is a good leader. He has to demonstrate.
Leadership by example. And,
exactly.
Wonderful. And Ritesh, the transformation from how, from charisma to authenticity to digitalization and to actually being human. That's a very nice, insightful way of thinking how it's transformed over the years. You articulate that really, really well. So from there, I just want to touch upon something that some of our viewers have asked on questions, but I'm going to word it a little differently and not touch upon those various questions. But is there a special power that lateral moves have in accelerating professional growth? And also, acquiring additional qualification to accelerate your professional growth, is that something that you look for? So what are the key things that you look for when you recruit people at various levels in their career? Do you look for the ability for people to make lateral moves? Do you look for additional qualifications? Or are there other non-negotiable qualities that you look for when you recruit talent?
Yeah. So if Mr. Sethi, let me go first and you can build upon. So yes, absolutely. There are different rules of recruiting. One, of course, you recruit people when they just finished their education. fresh off the block, finish chartered accountancy or any degree, end up joining, and sometimes end up recruiting people mid-career, lateral moves in the organization. Both have equal element of importance for any workforce, for any organization. The kind of diversified experiences your workforce should have really determines the ability of the team to achieve the objectives. So equally lateral moves, if one is thinking of changing industry to learn something different, or be it skill set or different industry, absolutely important to do. Learning, as I mentioned earlier, lifelong learning. Learning never stops. It's not about more degrees to be taken. Yes, as you are doing a learning journey, you get a set of qualification, and many of us get more than one set of qualification as we start our career journey. That's a big chunk of learning we do. But after that, how do I continue to learn, continue to grow myself by doing short courses, trainings? There are so much online resources which are available today to learn. The learning never stops. So if you have the learning mindset, you'll keep learning from people engagement to mentorship engagement, YouTube videos, sessions like today, when you're picking up of experiences of people. So there are multiple ways one ends up imbibing learnings. So I wouldn't say that to grow in life, one has to basically add more qualification. Once you have grounded yourself to a good set of qualification, it's the experience after that makes a difference. And hence the point I was making earlier, you got to choose the kind of jobs you want to do. And if that experience footprint is diversified, not only in terms of organization, but also in terms of roles within an organization, that is what will really equip you. And if sometimes it happens that in an organization you don't get all the facets of finance to learn from, then you will have to then work with more than one organization to bring that alive. Sometimes we fix a city, sorry, I can't move from Mumbai, I need to only work in Mumbai. Then you get yourself locked into a company which does not offer end-to-end career or various roles. Then you will have to choose more than one company and hence move laterally to pick up and have a wholesome experience of various facets of finance or leadership or business for that matter.
So to add to the when we recruit people or interview the people, chartered accountants, for the fresh chartered accountant, we see the capability of their understanding, the knowledge of the subject for which we are considering them. What is the knowledge? Like if we are taking a person, considering a person for accounting job, then what is the subject knowledge of accounting standard, like company law, basic things for accounting. However, for little more higher positions, the two things which comes to my mind is how we handle the stress. That is one thing. We can give a situation, or how he can be helpful, or how we can give a situation to him that if there is a conflict within the department, or conflict between the two departments, or between the management, how one can consider it to resolve this situation. So that is for the middle management thing. We want to assess the person. That's the point I want.
Thank you, Mr. Sethi. So we've talked a lot about technology, and Mr. Sethi, you've started your career also with Birla, where you spoke of the Partha system, and we've come a long way from that today, where we are talking of IR 4.0. We are talking of things like cloud computing and blockchain, and all of those concepts that are coming up now that we need to learn about. And so in our role as CFOs, how can we embrace these changes? How can we make sure that we are on top of all the technology that's changing? Also, when it comes to investment in technology, how do you evaluate these investments? Because this technology is evolving so rapidly. So while we learn about new technology, we also sometimes have roles where we need to evaluate whether to invest in new technology or not. So both these aspects of technology, if you could touch upon your experiences with them.
Yeah, so there's a very ground principle. I always see all this from one single lens when I'm trying to get technology, which is experiment and fail fast. So the times that we're in, nobody has a right answer. We will have to experiment. Some experiments will go successful, some will not go successful, which is where you got to fail fast. You can't spend time in doing something which has not gone right and then keep investing behind it for a long time. I know there's an English saying goes, when you're in a hole, don't dig further. So it's like that. So you have to experiment and fail fast is the principle I deploy. And I always keep encouraging my people that today nobody knows the right answer. If there's an area which can get solved through blockchain, let's experiment it. If it's not working, fail fast and move on. Let's try something else. But we will have to keep experimenting and find what works because everybody's figuring it out. Gone are the days when you say, I'm opening an accounting firm and let me come and tell you how accounting systems will be set up, which is easy. Gone are the days when you say, I have a large organization, I need an ERP, which will do my end-to-end. There's nothing called end-to-end now because end-to-end will keep getting redefined. What your customer wants and what your supplier demands, what your consumer demands. So the ecosystem of technology which is deployed is changing at a rapid pace. Just look at all of us. And sometimes I ask that question, the kind of my interface of technology at home, is it higher than that at work? Yes or no? So when I get up, I'm saying my music is on my phone, my internet in terms of my banking is on my phone, my shopping is on my phone, everything is on my phone. So amount of digital life I live as a human being of work is so high. Then I go and think, am I doing same thing at work as well? Am I doing my work task, my work processes with same amount of technology deployment? If no, then the question is why not? So it's to me it's all about experimenting and failing fast.
See, regarding digitalization, I was discussing the same thing yesterday with my son. Why there is no more digitalization in India? So, as rightly mentioned, that the payback of digitalization in a small organization is not that much, because for the full digitalization there is a huge investment required, and today the manpower in India is cheap. Of course, it delays decision making, it delays the work and implementation, but with the scarcity of capital, it is still not being considered as most important in India so far. Of course, the big organizations who can spend the money, they have gone through, and that is why the many organizations are able to declare their results in first week of the coming quarter. But still there are organizations who are not able to complete their accounts even for 30 days, for 45 days also. So that's the capitalization, the huge investment requirement is the important for digitalization.
And let me add, Mr. Sethi's pretty good articulation. Just give me one more thought. Let me just spend time on that. I genuinely believe the CFOs of today's and tomorrow have a very important job of making the business case for technology deployment in the business. And let me tell you what I mean by saying that. There was a time technology was evaluated from one dimension. How can it bring cost savings? Let me automate this. I will have less number of people deployed in the business and I will save cost. And exactly to Mr. Sethi's point, the kind of area that we work in, the country we work in, today the cost of labor, the cost of human capital, it is not as high in many developed world. It's very easy to make a business case basis wage arbitrage. No, we can't do that. So, but it's important. Yes, technology does drive efficiency of various operations, be it logistics cost savings, be it number of people we deploy to get a job done savings. But to me, that was an old way of looking at digital payback. So that has moved on. As people started to deploy more technology, they realized that apart from efficiency, I can then also drive effectiveness of the organization. Am I able to serve better my consumers? My case fill on time if I'm delivering a product, or if I'm delivering a service, is a service of good quality and good mark and delivered on time. So the CRM software which got done to listen to feedback from consumers and stuff like that. So then we started deploying technology to improve service levels of the organization for anything from making payment processing done on time to delivering customers and consumers need. So which is where then we started writing business case. That if I improve service to my consumers, they will demand more of my product. They will match and ask for more of my service. I can then drive business better. So then we started writing business case for that. Then again, that became a thing of the passé. Then we started writing business case. Can we drive growth of the business using technology? Then business case started getting written about creating growth. So how can I do innovation differently? How can my business model change compared to what I was doing in the past? How can I scale up and scale down? How can I experiment new business model at a very low cost rather than launching a product and making it available across multiple shops in the country? Can I launch digitally and make it available on digital platforms and then have a much lesser experimentation innovation cost. So the entire business model started getting driven, and then business case started getting written for those digital experimentation and then payback. So am I able to drive growth? Growth became a bigger driver than efficiency and then effectiveness. Last but not least, digital is all about also instilling and giving you competitive edge. Can you get competitive edge in your business by deploying digital technologies differently? And what would that business case look like? If you're able to articulate that business case, you will always have a very different lens compared to efficiency that you want to do. You will also then start thinking, what are the areas I should deploy technology? But then your mind is thinking much more than can I cut number of people which are required, automating an area to get the job done. It's not about that. Digital is no more that a story. So if one has thought through very well as to where you want to deploy technology, it's a very different way one can then write a business case. So that's a thought I thought, let me leave it, since the question was pretty important question which was asked.
Agility, I think nimbleness of organizations is what determines their eventual success. So it's not just labor arbitrage like you mentioned. It's much more than that. It's a very wide canvas that you need to consider before taking the decision to go towards automation. Thanks for sharing that perspective, Ritesh. But you also talked about experimenting and failing fast, and that planted a seed in my mind that we're talking about success here. But along that path of success, there are bound to be failures that everybody experiences. And I think it's very important that we talk about that and we share, any experiences we've had where each of you have been able to learn from your failures and move on to get even more successful, to move from strength to strength after going through a setback. Because I think it's very important in today's day and time where the last year or two, there have been several setbacks that people have faced. And we do want to hear from you whether there have been setbacks in your life and how you've learned and grown from them to be where you are.
Mr. Shetty, you want to go first or should I?
Please, one example, the failure not in life but in organization where you worked is the system of sales accounting was developed, but it was not successful because of I don't want to give you reasons why it is not successful, but the learning from that was how to correct it and how to implement it. So that was the learning in my organization, and it took a lot of time to correct it. Believe me, the debtors accounting was in such a big organization, it was a mess. So the failure of that system, it has affected the business and the accounting system of the organization. So nothing else more than that to add to failure.
Let me just pick up and I'll build something what Mr. Shetty just mentioned. Resilience is very important. And I was reflecting on this for quite a few years now. Whenever I have observed a successful leader in the business, be it a finance leader or a business leader, a marketeer, and I was trying to see as to what has made them successful. What is the one thing which stands out, which really makes business successful? And having worked very closely with many great leaders, I realized there's only one thing which makes them different, which is their resilience. Ultimately, the moment you keep becoming more senior with larger responsibilities, larger decisions you need to have, your work days becomes longer, the kind of decision one needs to do, it's not easy. Then I realized that these people are very resilient and they have very deep scars of experiences they have developed over a period of time. When you get scarred with an experience, let me say a massive control lapse which has happened, or a fraud which has happened of a significant nature in your organization, or a big business venture which has failed, or a big investment which did not give a payback. These things will happen. You can't stop them. But are you resilient enough to come out? Or people issues you might have in your team. And we all have seen the kind of health issues one can go through in times like this. So it will leave you scarred. But your ability to bounce back from those scars is very important. And in my mind, resilience has more dimensions than what one typically thinks of. There's a mental resilience, there is physical resilience, and both are important. Are we physically fit to survive and grow? Are we mentally strong to survive the kind of lashing which happens as we keep growing and we keep doing larger jobs? It's not easy. The responsibility which is on your shoulder is not small. And if you're resilient, then you're able to take those scars and move ahead. And that really determines your ability to be a big leader. So absolutely, I've always been a firm believer that if one is able to work through mental and physical resilience, one will go long in life. Otherwise, these setbacks will really hold you back and will make a failure out of you. So it is extremely important that we develop that resilience to come up with our own coping mechanism when the scars end up coming to you. And it could come professionally, it could come personally, but they will come. I'm saying one will be very fortunate if one doesn't have scars in life to move ahead.
Thank you, Ritesh. I think that's a very important message for everybody here. And you did touch upon how yoga and things like that you've been able to use these techniques to manage your life and to manage. I'm sure that adds to your ability to be resilient through difficult times. So brings me to a question of what traditionally we used to call work-life balance. But that concept of work-life balance is getting very blurred with all the work from home situation that we have, and I feel that we are moving more into a work-life blend environment. And what are your thoughts on that? How can we manage to have the right blend or balance of what we do at work and what our priorities at home are? Because your roles as CFOs obviously have you spending long hours at work, certainly. But that does not mean that the family gets completely neglected or your own personal needs and development needs get completely sidelined or sidetracked. So your thoughts on that, Mr. Sethi and Mr. Tiwari?
See, as you rightly mentioned, there is long working hours, but we can balance with some examples I want to give. Suppose there is a parent-teacher meeting in a school. We should make sure that we attend that. And it helps a lot in developing the relationship with the students, with our kids or teachers and the family. Don't ignore calls from the family members. Even if you are busy, just answer that. Maybe message, call back, but don't ignore that. So if we take these few things in of course, today all family members understand the requirement of CFO during the working hours or work environment, and they are ready to help it. But whenever they want time, we should be able to give them time. That is my experience, I want to say.
Absolutely, Mr. Sethi. I think so super important. But I'm going to take a little more time to answer this question. It's something which I'm really passionate about, this topic. So I'm going to spend a little more time saying why I'm saying what I'm saying. To me, work-life balance is a very myopic and a very narrow way of looking at life. And the whole concept of well-being is far larger, far beyond work-life balance. One doesn't need to chase work-life balance. One needs to chase well-being. And the point I was making, physical and mental well-being is important. And let me spend some time in talking about it. So it always starts with what is your well-being goal? And it's a very different goal everybody will have for themselves. My well-being goal, and some of the audience will laugh when I say that, but let me still share, because this is all about learning. So let me share my well-being goal. So I have a well-being goal in which I have a picture in my mind. I'm 70 years old. I'm finishing playing 18 holes of a golf round. I'm coming back after playing 18 holes of golf round to the cafe of the golf course. In that cafe of the golf course, my wife is waiting for me. And she's chosen to come after my golf round to have a lunch and tea or coffee or drink, whatever else with me. And then we are enjoying a very nice meal. We're eating healthily and having our set of drinks and beverage, whatever we want to have. And then I'm taking my car, I'm driving back to my home. That is my well-being goal. Why I say that? There are few things which are very important as part of this well-being goal of mine. I'm 70 years old, I'm able to play 18 holes of golf. It takes 4.5 hours to play, which means I'm physically fit enough at 70 years to be able to do that. That's one element of physical well-being, which is there at the age of 70. It won't be there if it's not today, if I don't build it. That's part of my well-being goal. I'm coming back and my wife is waiting for me, which means I've also invested in relationship. That even at that age, we are both alive and we are both healthy and she wants to spend her afternoon with me after a golf round and have lunch with me. Very important to invest in that relationship and not take your partner for giving. And number 3, we are eating and drinking, which means we have kept our physical health so well that we're able to enjoy. We're not, I'm saying, living off medicines, but we're living off some healthy food. That's very important element. My eyesight is good enough. I'm able to have my motor skills are good enough at 70 years. I'm able to drive my own car back after they drowned back with my wife to my home. So to me, that is how I have defined my well-being. Then I think, what do I need to do to ensure that happens? Well, that's my goal. Everybody might have a completely different goal to themselves, which means I have to ensure that I invest in physical well-being. So yoga is one way in which I'm able to maintain my strength and my own core flexibility. Playing golf is another way of for me to keep healthy, my back rotation, and amount of walk I'm able to do, undulating surfaces, the read, the open fresh air that gives me a lot of energy. That's important. Small things I was referring to, every 20 minutes, 20 feet away for 20 seconds. So you see, as I'm talking for last 1 hour, 20 minutes, sometime I just look little outside my window for 20 seconds, 20 feet away. Very important for eyesight. One of the doctor taught me. So those small things are very important for physical well-being. Then mental well-being. What are we doing in terms of mindfulness to drive our mental well-being? Because the kind of stress all of us have, and if you ask anybody, I'm saying, do you have stress? You never get an answer, no. All of us are stressed about. But if you don't deploy mindfulness, and whatever way one can get mindfulness, deep breathing could be your way of getting mindfulness, meditation could be your way of getting mindfulness, and there are multiple ways. Some people just play sitar and get mindfulness. So there are different ways and different rules people have. My firm, I would say, learning which I would want to share with the audience is, first define your own well-being goal. I'm saying you heard my well-being goal. That might be something completely odd. You might not relate to it, but you should have your own well-being goal. And once you have fixed that, then see what you need to do. Work-life balance, of course, will have a space, but it will have only a space. Only work-life balance will not give you that mental well-being goal and achieve the way you have defined for yourself. So my only request is, please think a little more broader than work-life balance and demand that well-being of yourself, both mental and physical.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mr. Sethi, and thanks, Mr. Tiwari, for that beautiful insight, well-being goals. So that again is a value and brings us to other values such as ethics and compliance. So the CFO's role, like you said some time back, is also being the driver of ethics, compliance, being the steward of the company in these aspects. And many times that also leads to a conflicting position sometimes. So I had addressed a question to Mr. Sethi, which we never got a chance to complete. But picking up from that question on, whether you've ever faced a conflict in terms of, what the requirements are from an ethical point of view, what the requirements are of the shareholder, or maybe some such conflict that you've experienced. And also how important is the role of the CFO as the driver of ethics and compliance? Mr. Sethi, I'd request you to go first because we were not able to complete that discussion.
Yes. I personally agree that the compliance and ethics is very important in business nowadays. The compliances are more and more digital nowadays, so we cannot have any chance to not to have compliances. I want to give one example for this. I used to be very strict in my organization where I worked for compliances. I don't name the company, but when I was working in a big organization, there was one transaction which was forced, that was to be done with the group company, a big transaction. So I told the promoter, say, we have to hold a board meeting for this transaction because it's a requirement. The promoter says, no, why we have to call board meeting again and again every time for such transactions? If you have to go to P, do you want any approval from the board? I said, no, sir. If we are sitting in a classroom, I had to take permission of the teacher for going to the post P. So I explained him the way, then I took the examples, I did more detailing, and I convinced the promoter that board meeting have to be scheduled for this transaction, and we did it. the transaction after board approval and the full compliances. So my point is the CFOs are eyes and ears of the management. Management may like to, the promoters may like to take sometimes decisions which without compliances or maybe delayed compliances, but we cannot afford today. And having seen the recent problems in the various organizations where the CFOs and executive directors are being held responsible, so it is more and more on CFOs, directors and company secretaries to ensure compliances. There is no second way not to comply with the present situation. That's my.
If I may add from my side, absolutely what Mr. Sethi mentioned. To me, as a CFO, as a finance professional, I draw a line. There's a red line. Business will never cross that red line. It is very important to have that articulation very clearly that we will do our business and we'll do our business with all amount of controls, risk, compliances and ethical compliances in place. Now, first of all, I'm blessed to work for an organization mentioned earlier by my personal ethics fully matches with my organization's ethics. And that, in my view, is one of the reasons why I have had a long career with the company I'm working for, Hindustan Unilever, for a long time. Because that is one of the foundational need of mine, which this organization fabulously serves. So it starts with that. But in our jobs, we'll always have a conversation. What is right to do? And in those areas, very important to draw that red line as a finance professional that we will do this, and if any compliance, any governance, any controls get compromised, there has to be a complete no-go beyond that red line. And once you are giving that message to your business, once you're encouraging your own finance team members to ensure that you stand ground with that every other risk we will take, but when it comes in terms of risking the controls, governance, compliances, and ethics of the organization, that's the line we will not allow anybody to cross. And that message, one goes loud and wide in the organization, helps you. But equally, there's also responsibility to create systems and capabilities. So this can be then delivered, monitored, and expectation is very well achieved in the organization. So equally, one has to also do a pretty good amount of work in terms of creating those infrastructure, those capabilities, those learnings around it to ensure it happens. But these things don't happen by chance or by will. It also happens structurally through capabilities.
Very true, Ritesh. But, despite all the systems, controls, procedures that you may put in place, there's a human element. And there's also that element of trust that needs to be there. Can you share your experiences with how important that trust element is? Of course, the fact that you have an ethical and a compliant organization is very important to win the stakeholders' trust. The fact that you have the controls and systems, very important to win again the stakeholders' trust. But in this whole equation, in your position as a CFO, you also need to trust your team. You also need to give them the space to operate. So your thoughts on, how important trust is to your role as a CFO at, in your interaction at various levels?
Yeah, so let me start, Mr. Sethi, you can build upon what I'm saying. So first of all, important to communicate to your finance function that this is important. The point I was making, the red line that nobody should cross, neither us or the business. And people get that confidence from your own articulation that, yes, this is important. See, finance as a function will keep having young generation joining us. They need to keep learning what is important to drive an organization. So trust will come from first a confidence that, yes, I'm allowed and I should and I will do right thing. And once you give that confidence and that right to your talent, to your workforce, which is when they will be able to work with confidence and then drive that in the organization. So absolutely, trust is important, human elements important, capabilities are important, but also sometimes just communicating that this is important makes a big difference. So there is no two views about that in the organization. And whenever you have an example where some things have not gone well, it's important not to hide it. It's important to make an example out of that in the organization, not only to the finance function, but also to the business team. So here we see an example which is not in line with our ethics. Fine, we will fix it, we will repair it, we will correct it. But this is something which should not happen. And those examples, one should not shy away from sharing to the larger organization. That's how people build trust. Because so people should also then appreciate it's not only an open forum that you're saying that these are right things to do. Everybody speaks in open forum. In closed doors, are you saying the same thing? When things go wrong, Do you openly share the learning out of that and reinforce that point? In my view, that's how you end up building trust. By just saying, I'm saying I have my own coterie of people who trust me, ain't going to work. Because ultimately, if something goes wrong, it's not, I'm saying, a larger part of organization will make it wrong. It is that one human being who was not sure that am I supposed to stand ground and draw a red line, or it is business is important, growth is important, profit is important, let me close my eye. That person in that moment needs to have that confidence and then, no, this is the red line, I will not cross because my boss has told me I should not cross. My organization has told me that we should not cross. And when we have crossed, we know we have not been proud of it and we learned from it. We shared about it. That's the confidence people need to have. Then people will trust in what you speak.
Yeah, you have actually said that trust is very important. And one thing you have very rightly mentioned also, that if there is anything wrong, one should accept it immediately as soon as it is known. Today, the trust of team with you and team trust you, that is very important for the good working environment.
Absolutely, thank you, and thanks for sharing. No sweeping things under the rug. Keep the problems out in the open, and that's what makes for a learning organization. Thanks, Ritesh, for that. I'll just change topics here a little and talk about sustainability, which is a very important topic that's being raised in these days, and it's I believe going to be a major responsibility of CFOs. We all know how BlackRock has been questioning companies around the world on their sustainability initiatives, and how the Big Four are putting up measures to identify and report ESG goals. So your thoughts on how important this is? Because it is going to be a game changer for businesses across the world, for manufacturing companies, for the way that investment decisions are evaluated. So as young finance professionals, how important the environment, sustainability, the governance sphere is for all our participants. So your thoughts on this, please.
Yeah, so I was mentioning a little while ago, Maitri, that to me there are two large trends, digital and sustainability. And this, in my view, will decide and define this decade for us. There was a time when ESG was something which was good to do. You do a lot of work and then you do some ESG and then you talk in your annual balance sheet about it. That's not the time that we're in. Today, a sustainable business is a successful business. A sustainable business is a competitively advantaged business. Consumers are making choices of their products depending upon what are the goals of sustainability companies are today driving. So it is also in the interest of the business to drive that. And as a finance professional, which is why there are two important jobs. One I alluded earlier, I'll talk about it again as well. It's not going to be easy. You can't have inordinate amount of resources to deploy beyond sustainability. Equally, you don't have so much of resources to define and deploy beyond technology. And hence creating the right business case for technology deployment and hence digital transformation, creating the right business case for sustainability investments is what, in my view, the profession of finance will have to do. If we are not able to make business case for sustainability, if we're not able to make business case for transformation of digital, we will fail the organization in times to come. So it has to be far more beyond than complying to a greenhouse gas emission norms or complying to something. It will have to be something which we define, which will give competitive advantage to our business model. If that's the business case we're able to articulate for the organization, the kind of investment, the kind of energy we'll end up putting behind it will be very different. And very rightly defined ESG, its environment, absolutely important to ensure that the world of tomorrow is equally healthy to live in as the world of today is for next generation. Its S is social. There's so much of social imbalance in the organizations, in the countries today, that is so important that large organizations, small organizations, everybody equally is able to drive that social agenda. Living wages, one of the things we speak about at Hindustan Unilever, everybody has a right to demand a living wage, not minimum wage, but a living wage. Important. No, those kind of conversations will become very, very relevant. Diversity and inclusion. No, a balanced workforce that we will have, a gender balanced workforce, a diverse workforce, various religion, various gender and various thinking, various experiences, various age, very important. if the diversity and inclusion is not there, I'm saying not doing a good job in that space. Equally, governance of the organization. And we all know that the governance has become more complex, which ought to be in the times that we are in today. Regulations are what they are. To comply with them, the governance standards which an organization needs is very, very detailed and defined. So if at all we are not able to focus as a finance organization to drive this and assume a leadership position in driving this. So we're not the one who have to just, our job in my mind is not only doing ESG reporting. And as we all know that ESG reporting is changing, there's a far clever and far more comprehensive set of requirements. And I really like the new standards we'll end up soon having across the country on ESG reporting. It's fabulous. But that's not the only job we have as finance professionals. Our job is to make business case to make sustainable living commonplace every single day. So if that's the reference you end up deploying, I think both the emerging trends of digital and ESG, we as professionals will be able to contribute through our finance function to this very important strategic thrust for the organizations.
Your thoughts, Mr. Sethi, on this?
See, on sustainability, he has covered most of the things, but I want to say that we have seen many organizations where the organizations are growing and with many generations. We have seen generations together, and we have seen organizations where in the same generation, they have built up the business and it's collapsed. So sustainability is important from that point of view.
So, just while we come to the end of the session, just a couple of questions so that we can kind of grasp everything that we've discussed in the last hour and 45 minutes or so. So in this constantly changing world, what are the expectations of a CFO, and how can the youngsters sort of mold their career growth towards, if this is a career goal for any of our listeners today? What can they do today to mold themselves to be able to meet those expectations in the future?
Mr. Shetty, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Sure. See, the one thing I would like to say, and I have experience in myself whenever we do some work, we attend meetings or discussions, one should be participative in the discussions. If we have our thought, we should put forth those thoughts. Maybe it may look funny to somebody, but it may click something which is new, which may be good idea. Or even if you don't agree with the discussions, you can put forth your point. Maybe I have seen, sometimes I did not agree with the decisions or point of the promoters, but I used to communicate to them even after meetings. So my point is, we should be able to put forth our views, ideas, point of view. Then we should be punctual and loyal to the organization. Punctuality means not only time or delivery also. Loyalty, I mean to say, we should be loyal to the organization, to ourselves. We should spend good time in the organization in terms of number of years. It should not happen that we join organization and leave in 9 months, 1 year, 2 years. It will help developing yourself, first of all. Not only because it takes time to develop yourself. You cannot learn anything in 1 year or go back to the new organization, different organization. And again, when we want to develop ourselves, we have to have the different role, maybe in same organizations also. It will be a good development. I am sure those who have good capabilities will get opportunities in the same organizations also, and they can prove themselves. And if anybody wants to know different industries, they can have the good opportunity to go beyond that organization also. Both have merits and demerits in their own. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may add to what Mr. Shetty mentioned, few elements we already discussed as part of the conversation about job description and job experience. Very important as you start choosing as to how you work and what experience you want from the various roles. I spoke about the 4 phases. So if one has an aspiration to become a CFO, please choose the Devis experience, which will expose you to all the four faces of a CFO. A strategist, as I mentioned earlier, a catalyst of change, an operator of business, and hence one of the topic which Mr. Sethi spoke earlier of business acumen, extremely important. Yeah, as an operator, you need to do that. And of course, last but not least, we get our seat on the table because we are steward for the organization. Very important. So if one has to become a successful career in finance and one is to drive that, please ensure that your experience touches all the four elements what you need to learn as part of your journey to grow and then become a successful finance leader, a CFO in times to come. All the four elements, please ensure that you choose roles which gives you this experience. We spoke about lifelong learning. Learning never stops just because you finish your qualification. Again, the various jobs you end up doing, please ensure that you end up picking learnings and keep yourself always, your game is in A game. One more element is the last element I want to add to that. There were times where individual brilliance is what took us far. No more. If you're not a collaborative team player, you will not go far. So as you start your career, as you drive your career, it's not about you. Yeah, it's irrelevant about you. It's about the team that you're part of. Is your team successful that you're part of? That is the most important element. Is your business successful to start with? Is your function successful to start with? Are people around you successful? Because if good things happen around you, good things will always happen to you. I'm a firm believer of that. So that's a very important trait that it is not individualism. It's about being a team player. So whatever job, role you end up doing, ensure that you do a fabulous job being a successful team player rather than somebody who is a successful batsman and scores a century and the team loses the game after that. That's not what is required. So all of us have a role to play in the team and we should ensure that we play our A role as part of this team. So those are the few thoughts I have in terms of how one could navigate and drive a successful career. And CFO is an aspirational job. You are at the top table. You are co-pilot to the CEO. You run the organization. You run the business. You define the strategy. You create value and you represent externally your organization. And it's a very proud moment when you stand up and speak externally about your organization. So it's a very aspirational space to be in. So absolutely would encourage all of you to keep learning and keep growing. And then I hope many of you end up being successful CFOs of the organizations that you aim and wish to work for.
Thank you, Ritesh. So just your closing thoughts and any key takeaways that you would like to leave with our participants today.
Mr. Shetty?
Yeah, it has been covered already, but I want to, maybe for repetition, take care of your health first, take care of a family, and enjoy the work.
The thought which I will leave to everybody is now is wow. The time that we are in, it is so important that we are completely focused on now. We cannot make the future wow. We cannot, if the past something has gone wrong, gone right, irrelevant. I'm saying past is past. Now is the time that we have that we can make beautiful. So all your energy, all your learnings, all the humanness, absolutely the point which Mr. Sethi mentioned about health, well-being. It's so important that you're fully focused on now to make that wow, and let not future plans, future amount of anxiety, anxiousness drive your current decision making. Neither of your past failures or past successes define your behavior today. Yeah, so it's so important that you completely focus on now and keep ensuring that every day you come, you lead every day and you make now as wow.
Great thoughts. Thank you. Now as well. Thank you, Mr. Sethi, and thank you, Mr. Tiwari. It's time's flown. Listening to all your thoughts, and thanks for taking the time to talk about your leadership journey to all our participants. It's indeed been an inspiring journey that you had, and an absolute delight to have you talk about it today with all our participants. So thanks, but I'll have to take a time check and hand over back to Mr. Ranganathan now. Over to you, Mr. Ranganathan.
Yeah, thank you so very much, ma'am. You are very wonderfully navigated all the questions. There is one question which has just now come. It's about how do you communicate bad news to your board of directors? Although I heard Mr. Sethi had covered this point a little by saying that if there is any disagreement with the promoters or with the directors, it's better to meet them even after the meeting and informally also talk to them. But this question is very specific from Sudipta Mukhopadhyay. How will you communicate a bad news to your board of directors? If you can kindly cover, since we have got 6 more minutes to go. Thank you.
Mr. Sethi, you want to go or should I?
You please go.
No, absolutely important. At the end of the day, any news is a news, good or bad. One has to share with the board. And only once we acknowledge we have an issue, we can solve it. There is also a responsibility we have as a CFO of the organization that any news which is material and bad, we will have to share with the board, and as appropriate, we need to share with the stakeholders and shareholders of the organization. So that is, in which case, a legal stroke fiduciary responsibility we have. But equally, if you don't earn the trust of your board, we will never be able to operate well as an organization. And the trust only comes if at all we're able to share good and bad news both with the board we're working with. So the trust and credibility of the board to be won is very important as a CFO. And hence transparently sharing what is going well, but equally sharing what is not going well. One is never judged of what is not going well. Things will not go well at some point in time in the organization. The element is to openly talk about it as relevant to the board, as relevant to the people, and then work on it to ensure that it doesn't repeat. Because again, it will be foolish that things go wrong and you talk about it and something happens again in the same space again. Then you will again end up losing credibility. So important that the things are shared openly to earn the trust and credibility, and equally actions are taken to ensure that it doesn't repeat going forward. So to me, that's always the way to ensure a healthy board relationship, a board conversation.
Rightly said.
Thank you so very much, sir. It was so very wonderful listening to the words of wisdom from our panelists. All those thoughts came out of their own experiences of life and career as a CFO. And our thanks are due to the eminent panelists, CA Ritesh Tiwari ji and CA Rajendra Kumar Sethi ji for taking out time on a Sunday for our members. We also thank our able moderator, CA Maitreyi Swaminathan ji, for so wonderfully steering the discussions. We thank the panelists for taking questions of our participants and answering them. We hope the members have found the answers to the questions, and also we hope that this will help them stand in better stead in their career. Sir, we eagerly look forward to our eminent faculty to address our participants in future programs too. Our heartfelt gratitude from the Committee for Members in Industry and Business of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Sethi. Thank you, Maitreyi. Super helpful. Thank you, Mr.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.